And it shall come to pass, when the evil spirit from God is upon thee, that he shall play with his hand, and thou shalt be well. Saul said unto his servants, Provide me now a man that can play well, and bring him to me. Then answered one of the servants and said, Behold, I have seen the son of Jesse, Bethlehemite, the Bethlehemite, that is coming and playing, and a mighty valiant man, and a man of war, and prudent in matters, a comely person, and the Lord is with him. Wherefore Saul sent messengers unto Jesse, and said, Send David thy son, which is with the sheep. Jesse took an ass laden with bread and a bottle of wine to kid, and sent them by David his son unto Saul. And David came to Saul and stood by for him, and he loved him greatly, and he became his armor bearer. And Saul sent to Jesse, saying, Let David, I pray thee, stand before me, for he hath found favor in my sight. And it came to pass, when the evil spirit from God was upon Saul, that David took an harp and played with his hand. And so Saul was refreshed and was well, and the evil spirit departed from him. This is a little different in that this isn't what you would normally consider depression. In other words, as far as like from what we would see, be it from a natural source. In that sense, as far as like a bad event or maybe bad health or something along those lines, but it is where he's troubled in spirit, and in particular it's from an evil spirit. God's spirit has departed from him, and then now he's in a bad state of mind. So, okay, here, we saw this a little earlier with the other series on music, in that music comforted him, music put him in a right state of mind, and that that it was, okay, verse 23. And it came to pass, when the evil spirit from God was upon Saul, that David took an harp and played with his hand. So Saul was refreshed and was well, and then the evil spirit departed from him. We're just looking at examples today. We're going to look at Saul, and we're going to look at Elijah as well, which is going to be further down in 1 Kings. But with regard to Saul, we didn't really get to this. Now, there's a lot of other factors involved with his state of mind and why he's in the condition that he's in. With Saul in particular, is that he responded improperly to God's judgment and then never recovered from his bitterness and depression. So he had bitterness that was welling up inside. He was disobedient to what God had told him. This is one of the many aspects as far as how depression comes about, and that is that you don't deal with something properly. What you consider to be an injustice, even though it wasn't. Saul saw the taking away of his kingdom from him, and saw as well, it wouldn't just be from him, but also for what he would consider for his sons, as to be a personal slight against himself. God's judgment on Saul was basically that he was proud. He saw himself greater than what he should have. God specifically stated that when he was little in his own eyes, that God had blessed him, and that he was powerfully endued from God's Spirit to be able to go ahead and accomplish God's will. But it was whenever he got haughty, whenever he got proud, whenever he got his eyes off of who it was that was empowering him, which was God, and then saw to himself that, hey, I'm greater and taller than everybody else, I'm stronger, or whatever his thought process was there, that he was the originator of the strength, of the power. That's where he began acting on his own accord, independent from God's leading. Now, Saul here initially is troubled by an evil spirit, and then later on, go to chapter 18. Let's go to chapter 18. we'll start at verse 1 just for context, but really verse 9 is what we're going to look at, and that Saul eyed David from that day forward. And from that forward, you see that Saul's desiring to kill David. Again, he becomes troubled with the spirit. But, okay, so it came to pass, when he had made an end of speaking unto Saul, that the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David. Jonathan loved him as his own soul, and Saul took him that day and would let him go no more home to his father's house. And Jonathan and David made a covenant because he loved him as his own soul. Skip down. Verse 5. Okay, David went out whithersoever Saul sent him, behaved himself wisely, and Saul set him over the men of war, and he was accepted in the sight of all people, and also in the sight of Saul's servants. And it came to pass as they came, when David was returned from the slaughter of the Philistines, that the women came out of all cities of Israel singing and dancing to meet King Saul with tabrets, with joy, and with instruments of music, and women answered one another as they played and said, Saul has slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s. And Saul was very wroth, this saying displeased him, and he said, they have ascribed unto David 10,000, and to me they have ascribed but thousands. And what can he have more but the kingdom? And Saul eyed David from that day forward. So now he has a jealousy. And then, well, verse 10, it came to pass on the morrow that the evil spirit from God came upon Saul, and he prophesied in the midst of the house, and David played with his hand, as at other times, and there was a javelin in Saul's hand, and Saul cast a javelin, for he said, I will smite David even to the wall with it. David avoided out of his presence twice. And Saul was afraid of David because the Lord was with him and was departed from Saul. Okay, therefore Saul removed him from him and made him his captain over 1,000. And he went out and came in before the people. And David behaved himself wisely in all his ways. The Lord was with him. And then when Saul saw that he behaved himself very wisely, he was afraid of him. Saul, if we were to continue reading here forward until the end of 1 Samuel, up until when he dies, he's going to spend the next roughly about 10 years pursuing David. He's going to chase him out altogether, and then he's going to start following him while David flees to the wilderness. God's presence is departed from him, and now he has an evil spirit troubling him. And then the source of remedy that he did have, which was David's playing, he seeks to kind of stamp him out, largely because of his bitterness towards what God had told him, which was, your kingdom is rent from you. And then later on, after he followed that, was that your house altogether is going to be cut off. And then if we were to fast forward to chapter 30, we see that as well, that because he can't get God to speak to him, that he goes to the witch at Endor and conjures up Samuel. And Samuel tells him, hey, why have you disturbed me? And his response to Samuel is, well, I couldn't get God to speak to me. He's like, well, he's not going to speak to you. What am I going to do for you? And then he told him that, tomorrow this day, tomorrow this time, you'll be with me in paradise, you and your sons.
He didn't say in paradise.
You're going to be with me, yeah, which you would have been in paradise.
It
doesn't specifically
I
say.
think Saul was a believer.
Yes.
Did just his sons go, or his daughters as well? When they all go?
Well, Michal was still alive, because she remained alive following. So it would have been the sons. Okay, so Saul responded improperly. And I know it seems silly, but what could Saul have done in order to kind of abate this from escalating even further, or even just to kind of deal with was going on.
Or-
Well, even earlier, even as early as whenever you had the evil spirit troubling him, and David was playing, and he's just getting to know David.
Then it just made his sin, right?
Would that have changed anything?
It would have changed the fact that he was already rejected from the king. If they had accepted at that, God could have still done something, even though he's not going to be king.
The only thing he could have done in obedience to God, in my opinion, is to, when he recognized that David was the anointed, he should have stepped down from the throne and anointed David king.
And he could have, yeah.
But as long as he continued to be king, he was just going to show his pride.
So he wasn't dealing properly with what the situation was. In other words, he wasn't in a right frame of mind. He wasn't in a right frame of thinking with regard to, what's that?
I was going to say, sort of like Moses, that when he struck the rock and God told him to touch his back and look down and that he didn't have to promise him. He didn't try to fight it, he just decided on that. Yeah, Saul could have done something like that.
There's other people that we see that actually respond in that same manner. In other words, David is actually one that we'll see that he acknowledges his sin later on. He accepts it, he owns it, if you want to use that expression. But yeah, he could have owned it. He didn't, and as a result, he just continued on a worse spiral than what he was. If we are in a position where we are known to sin, then obviously that needs to be dealt with. But the fact is, there are circumstances and situations that we need to accept and we need to own. They may not be pleasurable to us. They may not be seemingly what we would have planned for us. But the fact is, if you remain stubborn, trying to go about your own way, your own path, the fact is you're just going to be in this position that Saul was, which at the end he ended up just being killed off. He could have had a longer life. He could have actually been used, despite the fact that he was rejected as king. If he would have acknowledged as far as God's will for that. God anointed David. He had to do it in secret because he figured, okay, Saul's going to want to kill him, which was true. And then also as well, that you could have seen, well, who knows how God would have used Saul had he responded properly. Okay, so our sin may have far-reaching consequences, but it does not have to define us. It does not have to define us. It defined Saul, unfortunately. He started well, but he ended poorly. But just because somebody does something tragic, does something really stupid and foolish, put themselves in a position where they lose, I guess you could say, God's best for them, they don't have to be defined by that. If you have life, you still have hope, and you can respond properly to what God has for you. Go to 1 Kings chapter 19. First Kings 19. Okay, and Ahab told Jezebel all Elijah had done, and withal how he had slain all the prophets with the sword. And Jezebel sent a messenger unto Elijah, saying, So let the gods do to me, and more also, if I make not thy life as of one of them by tomorrow about this time. Then when he saw that, he arose and went for his life, and came to Beersheba, which belongeth to Judah, and left his servant there. But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness, and came and sat down under a juniper tree, and requested for himself that he might die, and said, It is enough now, O Lord, take away my life, for I am not better than my fathers. And as he lay and slept under the juniper tree, behold, there an angel touched him, and said unto him, Arise and eat. And he looked, and behold, there was a cake baking on the coals, and a cruse of water at his head. And he did eat and drink, and laid him down again. And the angel of the Lord came again the second time and touched him and said, Arise and eat, because the journey is too great for thee. And he arose and did eat and drink, and went in the strength of that meat 40 days and 40 nights unto Horeb, the mount of God. We'll stop there for right now. Well, you know what? We'll just read his mentality. Verse 9 and 10. And then he came thither to a cave and lodged there, and behold, the word of the Lord came unto him, and he said unto him, What doest thou here, Elijah? And he said, I have been very jealous for the Lord God of hosts. The children of Israel have forsaken thy covenant, thrown down thine altars, and slain thy prophets with the sword, and even I am left. Even I only am left, and they seek my life to take it away. We'll stop there. Okay, so this is following Elijah's great victory on Mount Carmel. So he has just rid the majority of Israel of the prophets of Baal at this point, because he had a challenge that he presented, and he said to them, come forth. And they came forth to the mountain. Actually, go to 1 Kings 18. 1 Kings 18, just a page over. Start at verse 17. And it came to pass, when Ahab saw Elijah, that Ahab said unto him, Art thou the he that troubled Israel? He answered, I have not troubled Israel, but thou, and thy father's house, and that ye have forsaken the commandments of the Lord, and hast followed Baal. Now therefore send and gather to me all Israel to Mount Carmel, and the prophets of Baal 450, and the prophets of the groves 400, which eat at Jezebel's table. So Ahab sent unto all the children of Israel, and gathered the prophets together unto Mount Carmel. So you got 850 now that are gathered there. And then here he's going to present the challenge to them. He said, Cry out to Baal, see if he answers you. And then he builds an altar there, and then cry out, see if he accepts your offering. So they spend most of the day crying out, cutting themselves. Baal doesn't respond. Then when he has, for God to be able to go ahead and respond, he says, okay, pour basically like 55-gallon drums, in effect, of water. Make a trench so that everything is, as far as the water that doesn't just run off, and it's contained therein, and then you have a big pool of water, everything's covered in water. He cries out to God, God sends fire, consumes the offering, and then he cries out again, and then he has God consume and then kill the prophets. So all the prophets are killed at this point. You have a great victory. This is the same man that prayed, and then he had, God basically had no rain in the land for over 3 years, so now you have a drought in the land. And then when he prayed again, the rain would come again. This is the same prophet. Basically, he's in your face, thus saith the Lord. He would be similar as to what would be John the Baptist. He's girded with camel hair. He's a hairy man. He's bald on top. And then as well is that he's very in your face. So now you have a message that's sent to him following this great victory, following this great show of power, obviously by God through him. But nevertheless, you would figure, okay, this guy's got some amount of confidence to him. And Jezebel says, I'm going to kill you. This time tomorrow you're going to be dead. And what does he do? What do you think somebody who's just had some kind of great victory like that will do? All right, whatever, go ahead, bring it on. Right? He's scared of this woman, and so he runs away. He actually runs pretty far because he's up in Israel. He's not in Judah. He's in the northern part of Israel. And so he runs down south, and then further than that, a day's journey. So he's out in the wilderness. If we were to have a map of Israel, he's down here, and he's trying to make his way further south towards what would be Sinai Peninsula. So he runs pretty far away, most of the span of the country, so that he doesn't get himself killed. And here's his mentality. He says that I and I alone am left of all that have served God. I've been jealous, and now they're going to kill me. You know, in other words, he's thinking, okay, in a sense, it's an indictment against God, not just against the people. In other words, God, you're not strong enough to protect me. God, I guess this is how you're rewarding me. And as well as the fact that, hey, you know, I'm, in reality, if you analyze it, that's what his mentality is. God is able to have protected him. God is able to have, go ahead, done great mighty wonders against Jezebel, as he already had, despite the death threat that he had from her. But nevertheless, his mentality is that, okay, I'm going to die. You know, so I'm just going to go run away. And then he sits down under a juniper tree and says, all right, God, go ahead and take my life. You know, it's over. What kind of response is that? Not a very good one, actually, to the circumstance that you're finding yourself in.
Didn't God tell him about this remnant who was actually still?
Yeah, we didn't read that, but he's later further on down because he's going to ask him.
So
He asked him 3
alone.
times.
He wasn't really left alone.
No. He puts him in a right frame of mind. Okay, so God's solution here, he rested and he ate and drank water. He rested and he ate and drank water. So, something that is helpful to get yourself in a right frame of mind with regard to depression, beyond just the truth of God, just on a practical level, just get rested. A lot of times we're being physically tired, physically exhausted, and we just need to get rest, get nourished physically. But here God puts him in a right frame of mind. Go down, because he asks him again. Actually, verse 11. This is God speaking to Elijah. He says, go forth and stand upon the mount before the Lord. And behold, the Lord passed by, and a great strong wind rent the mountains and break in pieces the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a still small voice. And it was so when Elijah heard it that he wrapped his face with his mantle and went out, stood in the entering of the cave, and behold, there came a voice unto him and said, what doest thou here, Elijah? And he said, I have been the same response as asked earlier. Been very jealous for the Lord God of hosts, because the children of Israel have forsaken thy covenant, thrown down thine altars, and slain thy prophets with the sword, and I, even I only, am left, and they seek my life to take it away. Then the Lord said unto him, go, return on the way to the wilderness of Damascus. When thou comest, anoint Hazael to be king over Syria, and Jehu the son of Nimshi shalt thou anoint to be king over Israel, and Elisha the son of Shaphat of Abel-Meholah shalt thou anoint to be prophet in their room. It shall come to pass that him that escapeth the sword of Hazael shall Jehu slay, and him that escapeth the sword of Jehu shall Elisha slay. Yet I have left me 7,000 in Israel, all the knees which have not bowed unto Baal, and every mouth which hath not kissed him. Okay, so now he has a solution to his problem. He himself is going to be taken away. He's going to, following what happens as far as when he actually goes ahead and anoints king of Syria, anoints Jehu, and then anoints his successor, Elisha. And then he's going to be told by the Lord, he's going to be taken up in a chariot. He's come They cross over Jordan, and he's taken up in a chariot. You go into 2 Kings and you see that. But with regard to here, God speaks to him. Now, what was he referencing as far as to get himself in the right frame of mind here? To actually go ahead and go out and do what God wanted him to do. God's voice. So in other words, he's referencing God's word, even though he's not looking back to something that was already written. Though they did have written revelation at the time, he's referencing what God spoke to him immediately. In our instance, we would have Spirit of God leading, but as well we have Word of God. So he's referencing God's word, God speaking to him. In this case, he's speaking to him directly. And so for us to calibrate our thinking appropriately, we need to get back into the Word of God. Yes, it's important to get rest. It's important to get nourished so that we're not exhausted, and so that we're able to go ahead and be in a state where we can receive truth. But we need truth as far as to go ahead and calibrate us so that we are in a right frame of mind and a right frame of thinking. And here he gives them some truth in particular. 7,000 that haven't bowed the knee. Okay, 7,000 that haven't bowed the knee. What was Elijah's claim?
That he was left by himself.
Yeah, I don't know anybody else. Is it necessary for you to have had somebody come alongside and say, hey man, I'm going for the Lord? That's helpful, by the way, it is. But it's not necessary. The fact is, you might actually legitimately assess as far as where I'm at. I'm the only person there serving God. But the fact is, God has his remnant, and then God has people. He told actually Paul, when he came into when he came to Corinth, that not to fear because he has much people in the city. The fact is, God has means, ways, people, resources that we know nothing of, that we have a clue about. So when we estimate a situation, we have to take into account that when God's active in it, if I'm in the middle of what God has called me to do, and I'm being faithful to that, that he's got things going on that I don't have a clue about. And so in other words, the world is not going to be revolving around me. I'm just a small component in the bigger scheme of what God's will is. And so, but it is still important for me to be able to go ahead and be faithful to what God has called me to do, to be diligent, to fulfill what God has told me specifically, and to not throw in the towel, not give in, not just say, hey, this is hopeless, there's no use. God's grace is sufficient to face any situation despite the outlook. Okay, God's grace is sufficient to face any situation despite the outlook. Go to Hebrews chapter 12. Hebrews 11. We'll start at verse 32. You can actually start further, like earlier, but we'll start at verse 32. And what shall I more say? For the time would fail me to tell of Gideon and of Barak, of Samson, Jephthah, David also, and Samuel, and of the prophets who through faith subdued kingdoms, wrought righteousness, obtained promises, stopped the mouths of lions, quenched the fire of violence, or the violence of fire, Escaped the edge of the sword, out of weakness were made strong, waxed valiant in fight, turned to flight the armies of the aliens. Women received their dead raised to life again, and others were tortured, not accepting deliverance, that they might obtain a better resurrection. And others had trial with cruel mocking and scourgings, yea, moreover, of bonds and imprisonment. They were stoned, they were sawn asunder, they were tempted, were slain with the sword. They wandered about in sheepskins and goatskins, being destitute, afflicted, tormented, of whom the world was not worthy. They wandered in deserts and in mountains and in dens and in caves of the earth. These all, having obtained a good report through faith, received not the promise, God having provided some better thing for us, that they without us should not be made perfect. And then the admonition is, wherefore, seeing we also are compassed about with so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which does so easily beset us, and let us run with patience the race that is set before us. So you have two categories of individuals here. One category are individuals that, despite difficult, overwhelming odds and circumstances, actually see a fulfillment of what God had called him to, of what God had promised him. Then you have a second category that actually don't, at least not physically within their lifetime. Their lifespan is cut short. Actually, they are very brutally treated. Cruel mockings and scourgings, bonds and imprisonments, stoned to death, that is, sawn asunder, cut in half, tested, slain with the sword, and they're wandering about in sheepskins and goatskins, being destitute, afflicted, and tormented, and then living in deserts and dens, caves, so not having any kind of stable income, any stable home, wandering about for their life, basically being miserable to the point of death, and then being killed off, usually in a brutal fashion. Okay. God may not have that for any of us, or he may not have that for all of us, or he may have that for some of us or all of us. I actually don't know. But nevertheless, God's grace is sufficient to face that. And we're told here, of both categories, you have individuals from both that, verse 39, these all having obtained a good report through faith. They obtained a good report through faith. With threat of death, losing your livelihood and even a place to live, be something that would be cause for somebody to want to throw up their hands and say, hey, you know what, this is not worth it. Yeah, okay, any of these things would be something that you'd be tempted to go ahead and want to, and even it would be normal. It would seem like your natural fleshly inclination to respond that says, hey, what am I doing here? Or even want to, a lot of times how you see in like a TV show or film or something like that, where they raise up their fist toward God and say, why me, that kind of response, that kind of thing. But God gives grace for that. And the fact is that if you have individuals that, despite suffering that, were able to go to their grave and stand before God, where God says, well done, and they obtain a good report. And that means it's possible for me too. It's possible for me too. Okay? Second of all, as well, is that, again, we're not guaranteed that this is what God has for us. It's not to say that, oh wow, okay, Christian life is going to be some arduous thing that needs to be endured. It's actually supposed to be enjoyed, delighted in. The fact is, God gives grace for that. God's grace is sufficient to face that. And I don't have to allow my circumstance, and I don't have to allow situations to dictate my outlook and my mentality to where it affects me and affects others in a negative fashion. So in other words, I don't have to be depressed. I don't have to I don't have to let these things bring me to a point where I throw up my hands and I quit. And I say, no more, I'm done. Okay, does anybody have any questions? Okay, next week we're going to be looking at David. Yes.
That's a good question. I think you look up how long Saul's reign was.
Somewhere around 30 years.
That I don't know specifically. I know he chased David through about 10 of it, so his last 10.
David was 30 years old when he became king. I don't find a reference in Scripture.
About 20 minutes.
How long was Saul reign?
20 years.
That I don't know. I don't know offhand. I'd have to look from whenever he was called, and then to whenever he was killed. Well, I guess that technically wouldn't, because David didn't officially take over to rule, but it would have ended at that point where Samuel called here, it's cut off, it's run from you. As far as God's concerned, but it didn't physically end until he was killed off in chapter 30 or 31. He spent the bulk of it in an impressive manner, in a bitter manner. It's sad though. He could have been used of God, and he could have had God do a lot of great things through him, outside of what he had already done in the early part of his reign. More questions? So next week we'll be looking at David in particular, and maybe there wasn't